I'm Vice President of the Board of Directors for Quatrefoil, and we're really excited to have Dick Hewetson, one of our founders, here tonight. Not only are we honored to have him anytime, but this is a special night because this is the inaugural event of a new speaker series that we're going to be holding odd months, the second Monday, and we're going to bring in leaders from the community, locally primarily, but Dick came from California to be with us tonight. As you probably know, Quatrefoil was founded by Dick and his partner, Dave Irwin, over 30 years ago. We had an exciting 30th anniversary event last fall. So we're just really excited with how successful the library's been and how well we continue to do serving the community, the local GLPT, the broader community, and the Twin Cities at large. So I think, is there anything else I should say before you start?
No.
Okay.
Anything like that?
I think
you want to.
No, I think it's about ready to go, so we might as well get started. And no, he's going to speak for a bit, and then there'll be time for a Q&A afterwards.
Yeah. Howard Mackey asked me to do this, and I usually say yes to most anything. And I wasn't sure what he had in mind, and we talked about it, and I think in a sense this is a trial run.
If I would have known that, Dick, I would have asked some better questions.
Anyway, it seemed to be the people want to know who I am. And of course, what everybody knows around here is that I'm the co-founder of the library, and people know bits and pieces of me. But I had a very active life outside of the library. And what I thought I would do is tell a little about who I am. And some of you know that I dealt with this question 15 years ago, and I wrote a memoir looking back over my whole life. And when I started to write, I realized two things. I didn't remember my childhood, and I'd always been old, because I'd always been somebody that everybody else thinks is old. So I went from no childhood to being an old man, which was a funny transition. Yeah, but it really was weird, but that's the way it was, and that's the way I dealt with it. So my childhood was perfectly dreadful. I was born in 1930. My father was a bank officer in suburban Chicago. And I was conceived, and before I was born, the stock market crashed in 1929, and the banks all closed. So I was born into a family without a job. My dad was without a job, as everybody around was. And we were homeless for the first 4 years of my life. And we never lived on the street, but we lived with friends and we lived with relatives. And I think I just kind of grew up on my own. I don't remember a lot of guidance. I don't remember a lot of encouragement. I enjoyed going to school. I got good grades, but nobody seemed to care one way or the other. And so anyway, I just, in that economy, in that milieu, where everybody's walking the streets without a job, you don't see any future for yourself. So that was the beginning of my life. And as time went on, I decided the most important thing that I had to do in life was to be sure I had a paycheck. That was the only thing that was important. And but from the time I was 15 years old, I started working. and I worked right on the street. But anyway, back then the wages was 25 cents an hour. I remember later, we're up somewhere along the line, I got up to 75 cents an hour. But, and I had no intention, I was good in school. My best friend was a very bright boy, and his family said that he was going to college. That was just for sure. And my family said nothing of the sort. And so in my mind, he goes to college, I don't. Now when I look back on it, it sounds really stupid. But that was the way I saw the world. And when I was graduating, I graduated from Roosevelt High School at 28th Avenue. The principal called me into the office, and I sat there with my homeroom teacher and the boys counselor and the principal all staring at me. It's like, now what have I done? And they said, you got the highest mark on your college aptitude test. What are your plans for college? And I said, I don't have any plans for college. And they said, why not? And I said, my family has no money. That was the end of that meeting. So all along, somehow I was just always stumbling, and nothing ever fell in along the way. I finally started a career with the railroad because I like trains, and then I decided to go into the church, and I became an Episcopal priest, and that was probably the best job I had, in that I had a home and I had money and security, and everything was going beautifully. Now, during all of this time, I never, ever acted on my sexuality. To me, I just knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't think I could do anything about it. And I would hear innuendos and things, and just enough to keep me scared of that. So in 1967, 4 priests from the Diocese of Eau Claire were elected to go to the General Convention of the Episcopal Church in Seattle. And one of the priests, Jack, invited us all over to have dinner at his house to discuss the issue. Now, Jack was a fairly new priest in the diocese, and he was just a charming guy, and I really enjoyed his company, and whenever we were together, we had a good time, and we would go out to dinner, as well as go to a play. We only lived 50 miles apart, and everything seemed very good. And when I'd be in Eau Claire, and we would do something, he would often ask me to spend the night. And I would say, I gotta get home, have things to do in the morning, all this stuff. And one day he said to me, we could shack up. And I thought, what? I didn't know a lot of words, but I've heard some of them. But anyway, but I didn't react. That kind of got to me. Well, anyway, this night, after we had this dinner, and everybody left, I went over to Jack and gave him a great big kiss. And he yelled and screamed at me and called me a faggot and told me to get out of his house. And I was absolutely devastated. So I went home, and over about a 3-day period, I recognized, because I've had depression in my life, I'd gone into a very deep depression, and I could hardly do anything. So I drove into Eau Claire, and I talked to Jack, and I talked to the bishop. He worked in the bishop's office. And Jack says to me, now don't you tell the bishop this had anything to do with homosexuality. Don't you tell the bishop. It was like, no matter what I did, I was being told what not to do. So the bishop sent me off to a psychiatrist. And I told him the whole story, and he convinced me that I wasn't a homosexual. I was just afraid of being a homosexual, and that I'm going to remain depressed if I live in this small town. So I got to get to a big city and meet the right woman. Have you heard some of these stories before? So I went that routine. But anyway, I continued helping when I left the church. And just a by the way point, is the people in Wisconsin where I was serving, and Todd is here, he's from that area, and the people are some of the most wonderful people I have ever known, and the whole congregation was wonderful people. They always treated me well, and I've always felt bad that I just kind of disappeared into the night, and I had arranged to go and see them this coming Friday. But I guess I won't. I guess I'm heading back to San Francisco, so that's fun. But there were all these things. But anyway, so I kept helping out on Sundays. I worked for the State Employment Service, and I helped out on Sunday mornings when priests were on vacation, things like that, to some success. But more and more, it made no sense to me, and I didn't want to be there. And I finally just realized I had to just forget this whole church nonsense, just go on my merry way. And so I did. And in the meantime, I got involved with the gay movement here in the city, and I met David Irwin. And we had a compatible relationship, and I think the only thing that we had in common was our age. I mean, of all the out gay men, we were the two old guys. I was 45 and he was 55, and everybody looked at us as if we were ancient. But I've always been old, so. So anyway, that, and then you know the story of how David was a book collector, and this all led to our deciding that we had this marvelous collection. We realized it should be available to people at a time when it wasn't, and we got the bright idea of starting a library, and we did it, and somehow it worked. And most of the people that made that happen are here tonight, because it's been quite an amazing trip. Now, the other important part of my life is, because of all my difficulties with the church. Oh, by the way, those 2 years after I left the church in Wisconsin, I filled in at 2 different churches in Wisconsin where Bishop had pulled the priests out overnight because they were allegedly homosexual, and there was no trial or anything. And I'm watching all this stuff happening around me, you know, and it was a pretty tough time. But anyway, David was the one who discovered the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which to me is the best organization I've ever found, and I've devoted my life to that now. And they deal with the separation of church and state. We have a staff of attorneys that any complaints we get anywhere in the nation, the attorneys, you know, send a letter to the school board, the mayor, whatever it might be, threatening suit. Sometimes we go on to a lawsuit and so forth. And if you're interested any more about that group, Todd, where do you see it?
Right here.
Oh, yeah. Todd is you're on the executive board, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I met Todd in Chicago at an FFRF convention. But anyway, that's been a really, really important part, because more and more I really come to the conclusion that religion does so much damage to so many people. And I know people don't like to hear that, but I just am tired of giving them a free pass with all the crazy things they do to people. And so anyway, that's my big thing, but I didn't come here to convert. So anyway, basically that's kind of where I came from and who I am. And it may have clarified some things for you, may not, and you might, whatever questions you'd like to ask, I'm open.
Well, Dick, I was curious, when you left the clergy,
Yeah.
had you already lost faith, or did you leave because
I was
of
losing
problems?
it. I was losing it.
Yeah.
But I pretty much, you know, when your paycheck depends on the faith. Yeah, you're in a, and that brings up another thing, the clergy project. And I don't know where that's at now, thousands of members, I think. We have a clergy project which is made up of active clergy who are atheists and don't know how to get out of their jobs. And we have a support group for them.
Did you happen to see this week the article? It was on yahoo.com, and it was about Hurricane Harvey and blaming LGBTQ people for that
Yeah.
because the mayor of Houston was lesbian.
Yeah.
So
And they've been doing that to us right along. Every disaster we have is our fault.
Yeah.
Jerry.
Dick, when you were filling in for all of the alleged homosexuals, did they ever think that you were an alleged homosexual?
Well, I don't think they did at that time. Or otherwise, they wouldn't have been sending me there.
It's ironic.
But yeah, it was, and they were, one of the stories just broke my heart. And this one wasn't alleged; it was true behavior. But there was the bishop called and told me about this priest, and that he had been picked up by the police in college restrooms in the town where he lived in Wisconsin, having sex with college boys. And the priest arrested him, and the bishop sent him off to a mental hospital and wouldn't tell his wife what the problem was.
She
And
might know. She might have known.
well, yeah, but I don't think she did. But anyway, and I went there for, Sunday after Sunday and watched her and her kids in the front pew crying. And it was just awful. And finally one Sunday, I said, Mary Ellen, you and I have to have a talk. And I said, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but I believe in honesty. And I said, I want to tell you what's going on. And she was devastated. But she did thank me for telling her. So, yeah.
I was just wondering if you had any advice for young people. I mean, you've cultivated a lot of resilience over your life, obviously, and I was wondering if you had advice for how do you cultivate resiliency, or how have you done it?
Not so much advice for young people, she wonders.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. No, I think that the only answer to young people is be who you are, and don't give in. Just don't give in. Yeah.
When you moved to Minneapolis and you said you got involved in the gay community?
Yeah.
What groups?
Well,
Were you
the
involved
first one
in?
I was involved in was MCGR, which became MCGLR.
Oh, the L's, okay.
And that was funny too because I didn't know where to go. Father Smith from St. Patrick's Church took me to Gay House, and I met Mike McConnell and two other men. But it was, a drop-in center on Ridgewood Avenue with no furniture and pillows on the floor. And here I am in this 42-year-old middle class person. And you know, when people were doing drugs and everybody was happy and everything, but I didn't fit in there either. You know, what do you do? But anyway, then I found out that Barbara Giddings was going to be at the university, and I went and heard her speak, and that was wonderful. And then I heard they were having this meeting of MCGR, and I went to that, and of course, through all of these things, all I ever really wanted was a boyfriend. But that never happened. It did finally, but.
And you said you graduated from Roseville High School.
Yeah.
Did you mean to say that you left Chicago after the stock market crashed and came up here with your parents?
Yeah, we came up here, that was a gap there. We came up here in 1937 to live with my grandparents here. My dad had been working for what was then called the War Department, but he again was unemployed. And so we came up here and stayed with grandparents. So that's what brought me to Minneapolis. And we moved all the time, and I went to all kinds of different schools, and it was really crazy.
Hey Dick, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How did you and David accumulate so many gay-related books at that time? Where did you get
David.
them?
Yeah, no, David is the book person.
Oh, okay.
And I used to joke that he had a card catalog in his brain of every gay thing that had ever been written.
Oh.
And everywhere we went, he would go to used bookstores, church rummage sales, up in the strangest places, and look through used books. And he had this uncanny way of finding this jewel in a haystack, you know. And he would get so excited. I still remember the book Derek's, which you still have, and that's short stories by James Barr. And he found that at McDonald's bookstore in San Francisco, and it was marked 50 cents, and it was out of print. And you would have thought he had won the lottery. He was so excited. But he was the collector. I was more into the political movement, the periodicals, reading current periodicals and so on. But the books are really David's thing.
Are there any gay lending libraries in San Francisco that you're aware of?
Sort of. They have the queerest library in the world. And don't forget that. It is run by the city. You can't check out books. It has a relatively small collection, but it is the queerest library in the world. There's nothing anywhere outside of San Francisco that comes up to it. And I get what I call the San Francisco glassy look. Whenever I bring up anything that goes on here, I say anything about Quatrefoil Library or something in a conversation, I just get this look on them. What are you possibly talking about? They don't, and they're not even interested in hearing what you're talking about. You know, don't destroy their delusion. But
So do you think that's because they consider themselves the queerest place in the world, or do you think that's because of the general attitude that if it doesn't happen on the coast, it doesn't happen?
well, I think it's both. But it's been amusing to me every time I went. They have a gay lending library, the Harvey Milk branch. I have no idea how it compares to our collection because I've never seen any statistics on what they have. But the branch library in the Castro has a large case section. The James Hormel showpiece downtown, he has a very limited collection. And I don't think they have very much of the things that you have from around the world. That's another thing there. I've had trouble with the Historical Society. They have a San Francisco GLBT Historical Society, which they advertise to all the tourists, and they all run down there to see it. But they don't tell you it's the GLBT Historical Society of Northern California. And they don't want anything if it isn't from Northern California. They have turned down so many things I've tried to give them. I just give them to Lisa now. You know, the attitude there is just strange, and I don't understand it. Yeah.
Dick, could you tell us how it makes you feel on something that you and David started that was started small
Mhm.
and it's grown to be 31 years now of
Yeah.
starting? How does that make you feel?
Oh, it's hard to express. I mean, it is just overwhelming. When I walked into this place the first time, it's just overwhelming. And my first thought always is, if only David could see what he did. At least I'm having a chance to see it. But it's absolutely incredible. And as I say, I think that speaks for this community. Not only the Quatrefoil community, but even the Twin Cities. And I'm not that familiar with it now. But it just seems to me that there's a community feeling here that I never feel out there.
Did you and David have a chance to see the St. Paul Library?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were there when we rented that one. Yeah.
How many books were in your closet when you moved the collection?
That's a $64,000 question. First of all, it was a very small linen closet. And everything I read now sounds as if it was full of 15,000 books. But the closet rule was, at that point in David's life, he was not out to his co-workers, his family. So if a book on the spine had homosexual, gay, lesbian, whatever, a word like that, it went into the closet. You know, if it has, like Quatrefoil is fine because it doesn't say anything. But that was the closet rule. But the closet legend rule, and it's a fun legend.
Did you have a whole lot of different ideas for the name of the library?
You know, David chose the name. When we decided to do this, the very first thing David said, I want to call it Quatrefoil Library. Because when he was in the Navy in the Second World War, when he was in the Air Force in the Second World War, he read Quatrefoil. And it was the first positive book he ever read. And he was so moved by the book. So that's how we got this strange name for this library.
Was that also written by David Barr? Was that also written by David Barr?
Yes, James Barr, yeah.
Who also wrote A Brother's Touch, which used to be a bookshop here.
Yeah, but I didn't know that was James Barr. I don't think it was. Anyway, I understand Harvey has died too,
Yes.
from Brother's Touch. There.
What you said that David was an avid collector. What kind of collector? Was he really always looking for those bargain books, like you said, at Rubber Sales?
No, he
Did
was
do any
really just
high-end collecting. like through
he would pay anything for a book, but it was just so funny to watch him get excited about the bargains he found. What had happened up until he met me, he bought all these books and he read them and he threw them away because you never wanted to be caught. If you died and your Aunt Mildred found that in your apartment, you were condemned for the rest of eternity. I mean, people, it's amazing how afraid we were of being discovered. But once he was with me and I was perfectly comfortable, he had a safe place. And that's when he really started collecting in earnest.
When you first started Quatrefoil then, did you have a futuristic picture in your mind of what it would become, or you just like,
Yeah.
somebody showed up and took out a book?
No, our hope was, we started out with 1,500 books, and our hope was that we would find a space big enough for those books, and maybe a meeting room for authors, visiting authors, maybe even a sleeping room for visiting authors. And we thought if we got to that point, that was success. So it's beyond anything we even thought of.
Once Quatrefoil was up and running, did other gay groups around the country contact you and David, say, how do we do this, or? did everybody
Not
feel
very
alone?
many, but that's another story that doesn't get told. Even I think with Quatrefoil's own PR, that this library, since we were here, has started several libraries in other cities, which is rarely talked about. We did have people send us books. The first books came from Los Angeles, because we had some article in the Advocate. And, but the fact that the number of places that Quatrefoil has helped and doesn't seem to want to brag about it, and I just think, personally, I just think they should do more bragging.
I can remember feeling great pride when I would read about how you and David had collected together the nucleus of an LGBT library and simply given it to a community. And it would be nice if we could continue to do that rather than have books.
Well, I'm sure that's still happening. And that was the hope, but I think it certainly has proved to be a success. But you know, we did, and it's like what I was telling you about myself. You know, I just kind of, whatever I got to do, I do. You know, when it came to Quatrefoil, when we decided we were going to do it, we just did it. And it was a crazy. The first year was really strange. We were up on Broadway, and I worked downtown Minneapolis, and I drive up in the snow, up Broadway, and then back to St. Paul. And David would go up there, and Jerry would be there helping us. Jerry's one of our...
Standing queue on page 69.
Yeah. She knows the routine, a queue on page 69. No, a lot of people were very, very helpful to us. Yeah.
What happened to did you save the periodicals that you would read? That you were reading?
Oh yeah, they all went into Quatrefoil.
Okay.
Yeah. David never got rid of anything. I mean, once he discovered you didn't have to throw it away. And of course, after we opened, I think every other person tried to give us their whole collection of advocates.
I still do.
I'm sure you'd like these. It's like people giving them to National Geographic. And we were fortunate too. You know, we were very careful. We had women involved with us in the incorporation. And when we did our press release, we commented, you know, that we had spots in the library that needed to be filled. And David did buy women's books, but not to the extent he probably should have. And we let people know we wanted all of that stuff. And of course, then there was the whole thing about censorship, which I'm glad we solved immediately. You know, that nothing was to be censored. And you know, when you think back to those days, there were a lot of political hot potatoes in this.
It's extraordinary how influential the Twin Cities have been, the number of writers and academicians who have passed and spent time in the Twin Cities, like Robert Preston,
Yes.
taught at the event, and various other people of some significance have spent a time here.
Yeah.
And we've been indirectly quite influential. But I remember in the 80s and the 90s, Quatrefoil became a clearinghouse for a great many other things, as families who had dying relatives didn't know what to do with the stuff and simply dumped it on your lap.
Oh, really?
And I remember seeing a large office cabinet filled from top to bottom.
Yeah.
With tildes. The family statistic.
Yeah.
Do you still have a personal library at home, or are you done with
Not
those?
much one. I live in a senior place and I have very small space. But I'm not a book collector. And I'm really not a reader. Well, I know that sounds very funny. I do read, but I've always been a slow reader, and I have difficulty reading novels. I get bored. Probably in a year, I read maybe 3 or 4 books that I really get into. And I have 3 on my list right now to read, because so many good things are coming out right now. But I'm not a book collector.
What's your magazine collection like?
My
What's your magazine collection like?
Well, I get rid of those every month. I do a lot of periodical reading. That's the way I keep up on things, yeah.
Cool.
But I pass those on to people in the hotel. We have a little library in the hotel. When I finish a magazine, I put it in the library and it's gone the next time I walk by. So I figure somebody must have wanted it.
One of the other people commented on the Twin Cities. And I know that in the 70s, the University of Minnesota was among the first doing transgender surgeries.
They were.
Was the library, was there any, did anyone even ask about that? Or was it primarily gay men? Or there were lesbians as well?
Of course, the library didn't
lopsided?
exist. What did we say,
86.
86.
Good point, so it was a
Yeah.
decade later.
But there were a lot of things going on here that this community has not gotten credit for. And that's one of them. That's what's another thing. I get involved anytime anybody comes up to me and I think I can be helpful, I jump in, which is not very smart. But I started a guy, I think in 1975, a transgender a man who wanted to be a woman. And it was really funny. He showed up at Gay House, and they didn't know what to do with him. And he was old. So they called me. Because we had something in common. And it turned out we were the same age. And I spent a lot of time with him, and I did research. And I got him in touch with Randall Lakoski. And he went on over a long period and went through the whole thing. I have lost track of him in the meantime. But he was a riverboat captain, so he had a very weathered face. So he didn't look very feminine at all when he put on his wig and stuff. But a very, very delightful person. Wow. You haven't spoken.
Yeah, I'm just curious, you said that people would, somebody would die and they'd, bring the Quatrefoil, their books. And I would imagine that maybe they brought also documents and letters and all of those things. What did you have an arrangement to, because it doesn't seem like this is, this is an archive, it's just a library. So what did you do?
Well, the present staff probably could answer that better than I could. I remember what was happening back when we were involved and totally confused.
Well, we did make a decision to not be an archive, and so the few things that we had some personal papers, organizational papers. Some of them went to the Minnesota Historical Society, but then once the Treader Collection at the University of Minnesota started, everything that we get like that we give to the Treader Collection. So we really have different roles.
There were a couple of other hands. Yeah.
I live in Austin, Texas most of the year, and they have a fairly decent collection of LGBTQ books and DVDs and so on in their collection, and a very large online opportunity. I do a lot of my readings on my phone or on a laptop. But I was wondering about if you would have any thoughts about the impact of online libraries on gay communities. community, like, the nice thing about this, I've been a member of Quatrefoil almost since the beginning, many, many years ago. But this place has a community center
Yeah.
kind of thanks to it, which we don't have in Austin. There is, even though it's a fairly big city, there is nothing like this. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about digital or online.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't have any thoughts on it. Kathy, how much are you being affected by online?
Yeah, well, I think online fewer people are reading, and it's, so I think the use of books is going down somewhat. DVDs are still high. We can't afford online resources. So they're extremely expensive. So I wonder if the place in Austin is affiliated with a university.
It's
or
a public library.
Public, okay,
Austin Public
okay,
Library.
they have tax money.
Yeah.
So we really can't do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I
Unless it's in the
think you
public
do a
domain.
fairly decent job of buying new, and keeping up with what's coming out.
Print material.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but also online, so.
Yeah.
They have both print and online. So,
Yeah.
wondering about that.
For the newest level of social acceptance in the younger generation, how do you think the Q will evolve? Do you think it will evolve into a literary center where we can empower future generations on writing or anything like that? Or did you have any other ideas regarding the evolution of the Q?
I certainly think that all the things that we have done, to make ourselves known and our resources known, have had a cumulative effect. And sometimes it's discouraging, and sometimes it's extremely encouraging. And it's just shame when you see what's happening in other parts of the world to this day.
Are there any other questions or thoughts, or do you have any closing thoughts, or?
Except that how nice it was to be here.
Oh, well, we're very glad
It's
to
so
have you.
wonderful to see all of you. And even though I don't know every one of you, I know you're my good friends.
That's right.